AI governance is easy to announce and hard to run. I mean, most teams already have some policy language somewhere. A slide deck, a memo, a page in the intranet that says, responsible AI use. But then Monday happens, a model changes, someone adds a new tool, procurement asks a contract question, and suddenly that policy is not enough. Here's the point. If your governance process cannot keep up with a normal work week, it is not governance. It is documentation. Welcome back to AI Change Desk, AI news you can use and change management you can execute. I'm Michael Hanna Boutros Meyering. And quick disclosure up front, AI-assisted tools are used in parts of this production workflow for drafting, synthesis, and packaging. Final editorial judgment, risk posture, and release approval stay with me. Also, quick boundary note, this is general information, not legal advice. This is AI Change Desk. Thank you for choosing to tune in. Now, if you listened to episode 1, we introduced the 4D desk memo: decision, data, drift, deployment. In episode 2, we got into policy basics for operators. Today is the missing bridge. This one is implementation under real news pressure. Because honestly, this is where organizations stall. They do kickoff energy really well, then the operational loop never gets built. So we are going to do this in a practical way. We'll use 4 current stories, and for each one, we'll answer 3 things: what changed, why it matters operationally, and what you should do next week. Let's ground this. First signal. Anthropic released Claude Sonnet 4.6 with accompanying API release notes in that same window. Now, when most people hear new model, they hear performance and capability. Better coding, better reasoning, better whatever. But operators should hear something else first. You should hear workflow impact. A model release is not just a model release. It is a workflow event. Because model changes can shift output structure, tone, refusal behavior, tool calling reliability, latency, and cost patterns. Maybe not all at once, but enough that your existing process can drift without anyone making a bad decision on purpose. And that is the part teams underestimate. Governance failures are usually boring before they are serious. A summary gets shorter and loses one critical detail. A classification prompt starts overconfidently labeling edge cases. A workflow that was stable last week starts throwing parse failures because output shape drifted. None of that looks dramatic in isolation. But put it together over 2 weeks, and now your controls are working off old assumptions. So what do? You run a model change checkpoint every time there is a major release signal. Keep it short, 30 minutes. Same owner every week. Start with decision. Are we testing this now, later, or not at all? Then data. Which workflows and data classes are in scope? Then drift. What are the top prompts where quality matters, and what are pass-fail thresholds? Then deployment. What gets communicated, and what is the rollback path if results degrade? You do not need perfect instrumentation to do this. You need a repeatable cadence. And if your team only applies one thing from this episode, use this one. A real model change checkpoint is where governance stops being abstract. Second signal. Anthropic also introduced Claude Code Security in Research Preview. Security tooling is where teams can get a little overexcited because everyone wants faster triage and faster remediation. And to be fair, nobody wakes up saying, I hope our incident queue moves slower today. But speed can create a control trap. The trap is thinking that because a finding came from an AI-assisted workflow, it is somehow more objective than a human finding. That is not true by default. You still need evidence quality. You still need review quality. You still need accountability clarity. There are 3 risks I want you watching here. 1 is confidence inversion. People trust the system output tone more than the underlying evidence. 2 is scope creep. A tool that was introduced as assistant quietly becomes decision maker. 3 is ownership blur. A patch is generated with AI assistance, approved by a human, merged under deadline pressure, and then nobody can clearly answer who owned the risk decision. If those 3 risks show up together, incident reviews become messy fast. So here is the practical control set. Keep a human decision lock for severity and merge approvals. Require linked evidence for findings, not just model says critical. Track false positives and false negatives for at least the first 6 weeks. Update incident playbooks to explicitly include AI-assisted code change pathways. And look, important point, do not remove existing controls just because a new AI security capability landed. Additive controls first. Optimize after you have real metrics. That one choice alone can save you months of cleanup. Third signal, OpenAI for India plus Tata Group's collaboration announcement. If you are an operator, this is not just market expansion news. This is a procurement and operating geography signal. A lot of teams still evaluate AI vendors on feature quality plus cost. That was already thin. Now it is genuinely risky because deployment geography, data handling defaults, and contract language are operational controls now, not legal footnotes, controls. Here is the sequence I see all the time when this is handled late. A business team pilots quickly. Usage grows informally. Then, security asks where data is processed. Procurement finds missing language. Legal asks for amendments after behavior is already socially normalized. Then governance gets blamed for slowing down the business. But governance was not the blocker. Late governance was the blocker. So, what should be in your baseline procurement checklist now? You need explicit data handling clauses for allowed data categories, processing boundaries, retention defaults, and deletion terms. You need a model change notification clause so impactful shifts are communicated early enough for control review. And you need sub-processor transparency so your risk mapping is not guesswork. Then capture all of it in one short artifact, an AI vendor decision record. Business purpose, approved use cases, prohibited use cases, data boundaries, control owners, review date. That is it. One page. If that page does not exist, your rollout is running on memory and good intentions. And good intentions are not an operating control. Fourth signal. NIST opened public input around AI agent interoperability and efficiency with a corresponding federal RFI process. Now, we need to be precise here. This is not a final binding standard, but it is still a strong directional signal. When institutions start shaping interoperability and efficiency expectations for agents, procurement questions get sharper, audit conversations get sharper, and internal architecture discussions should get sharper too. So the practical move is not to wait for a final standard PDF. The practical move is to run a quick inventory now. Where do you already have agent-like behavior? What actions can those systems take? What approvals gate those actions? What logs are retained and for how long? Who gets paged if something goes wrong outside business hours? If your team cannot answer those questions clearly today, that is your highest value governance work. Not adding one more pilot. Not adding one more demo. Clarity first. Quick late update block before we move to implementation. OpenAI announced funding for the UK AISI alignment project. And separately, Anthropic and Infosys announced a regulated industry collaboration. Why do those two matter for operators? Because they reinforce the same pattern we have been talking about. Governance is no longer just internal policy text. It is partner ecosystem readiness, evaluation maturity, and sector-specific operating controls. When safety research funding scales and regulated enterprise partnerships scale at the same time, your internal bar has to scale too. So, practical takeaway. Do not separate strategy news from operations. Treat these as implementation signals. Evaluation expectations are rising, and deployment pathways into regulated workflows are accelerating. If your control documentation is still lightweight, this is your warning window to tighten it before volume increases. Okay, let's convert all four signals into an operating loop you can actually run. This is the weekly AI governance desk. 25 minutes, once a week, same owner, same structure. You do not need a giant committee. You need a predictable operating rhythm. Step 1 is intake. Gather weekly change signals, model releases, security tooling updates, vendor announcements, standards and regulatory developments, and any incidents or near misses. Then triage quickly into 3 buckets: informational, monitor, or action required. That triage prevents the common mistake of overreacting to every headline. Step 2 is risk translation. For each action-required item, ask 4 questions. What changed technically? Which workflow does it touch? What risk posture changed, if any? What control or communication change is required this week? Not sometime this quarter, this week. Step 3 is control assignment. Every action must have one owner and one due date. No owner means no control. No due date means no implementation. And yes, this sounds obvious, but it is the most common failure point I see. Step 4 is operator communication. This is where adoption either stabilizes or drifts. Your frontline teams need simple language: what changed, what to do, what not to do, and where to escalate edge cases. If an operator still has to ask, "Wait, what does this mean for me today?" then your message was too abstract. You can keep this to 1 page per week. And if you're wondering whether this is overkill, let me answer directly. It is less work than incident recovery. Let me make this concrete with a realistic week. Say your org expands AI usage for drafting, summarization, and support triage. Everything looks low risk initially. Monday, leadership says, move quickly. Your desk response is not, slow down. It is, move fast with bounded scope. So you define one approved model path, one data boundary, one owner per workflow, and one fallback path. Tuesday, someone asks if they can paste a customer escalation thread with identifiers. That is where policy language gets real. So you ship a plain usage table. Allowed. Requires approval. Prohibited. One table can remove a shocking amount of confusion. Wednesday, drift appears. A team repurposes summarization for performance feedback drafts. Nobody planned for it. That is normal human behavior, not malice. So you classify the new use case, assess risk, decide allow or constrain, and communicate quickly. Thursday, model behavior changes and output tone becomes too confident in uncertain contexts. Because you already run model change checkpoints, you have top prompts, thresholds, and a fallback route. So you make a selective decision. Keep the model for lower risk workflows. Roll back for higher risk decision support until tuning is complete. That is mature governance, selective control, not full panic. By end of week, you publish a 1-page weekly record. What changed? What decisions were made? What controls changed? What operators should do now? Now leadership has an audit trail, not memory, not Slack archaeology, a real record. Before we close, I want to call out 6 failure patterns that repeatedly break good intentions. First, governance by committee with no single operator owner. Second, policy language that cannot be executed under time pressure. Third, one-time training with no weekly update rhythm. Fourth, no exception pathway for edge cases. Fifth, measuring adoption only and ignoring control performance. Sixth, ignoring standard signals until procurement blocks a deal. If you avoid those 6, your maturity improves quickly. Now, quick practical templates you can steal this week. Use a weekly governance memo with 3 lines. What changed, what to do, what not to do. Use a procurement question set that covers data handling, processing boundaries, retention, change notifications, and audit exports. Use a 1-paragraph allowed use snippet for operators so people do not have to infer policy during busy work. Use a model change decision log with date, affected workflows, regression result, decision, owner, and next review date. And use a short exception approval template with explicit scope and expiration. These are small artifacts, but together they create discipline. Let me add 2 implementation mini cases, because this is usually where people ask, okay, but how does this play out in practice for different teams? First mini case is a public service or public-facing operations team. Let's say they want to use AI for resident inquiry triage and response drafting. On paper, this sounds straightforward. Faster responses, better consistency, less burnout in frontline queues. And those benefits are real. But the governance edge shows up quickly. Because inquiry content can include addresses, case IDs, benefits questions, health context, legal escalation notes, all mixed together in one thread. So the policy statement, Do not paste sensitive data is not enough. People under queue pressure are not doing legal analysis line by line. What they need is workflow native controls. For this kind of use case, here is a practical sequence. Start with tiering. Drafting and summarization for low-risk informational responses might be Tier 1. Any response containing case-specific determination language might be Tier 2. Anything that can affect rights, eligibility, or enforcement should be treated as higher tier with stricter controls. Then put controls in the product workflow, not just in a handbook. Use pre-send checks for blocked terms. Require supervisor review for Tier 2 outputs. Require human-authored final sign-off for Tier 3 outputs. And, this matters, keep an exception log. When someone requests a bypass because of urgent workload, log it, not to punish, to learn where process and reality are misaligned. Then track two experience metrics in parallel: queue time reduction and correction rate. If queue time improves but correction rate spikes, your control design needs tuning. If queue time improves and correction rate stays flat or improves, now you have evidence for expansion. That is governance maturity, evidence-based expansion, not vibes. Second mini case is a private sector product or support organization. They add AI to support triage, QA summaries, and incident postmortem drafting. Again, huge upside. But same pattern. Workflow expansion outruns control updates. A support lead says, "Can we also use it for customer commitment language?" A PM says, "Can we use it to auto-suggest compensation tiers?" A success manager says, "Can we have it draft executive escalations directly to enterprise customers?" And now you are crossing from internal productivity into customer impacting decision support. So the governance desk needs a hard line between assistance and authority. Assistance means the system proposes. Authority means the system decides. Most teams should stay in assistance mode much longer than they initially plan. Not because AI cannot be useful, because accountability has to be legible first. For this case, a tight operating control set looks like this. 1. Confidence labeling. If the system output sounds certain, but underlying confidence is low, that output must be flagged for mandatory review. 2. Action class boundaries. Drafting can be automated. Customer commitment language requires human review. Compensation or remediation recommendation requires manager approval. 3. Policy by channel. Internal notes, external email, contractual updates, and executive comms each have different thresholds. Do not collapse them into one rule. 4. Response traceability. Store source references and model metadata for high-impact outputs. If a customer dispute appears later, you can reconstruct the decision path. And yes, that means a little more design work up front, but it avoids expensive "what happened" meetings later. There is also a leadership communication angle that teams miss. When leaders hear governance, they sometimes hear friction. So your job is to reframe governance as a reliability function. A simple way to do this is language. Instead of saying, "We need more controls," say, "We need predictable operating behavior under model and workflow change." Instead of saying, "We need approval gates," say, "We need clear ownership and escalation paths so decisions stay fast under pressure." Instead of saying, "We can't roll this out yet," say, "We can roll this out in bounded scope this week, then expand with evidence." That language shift matters. It changes governance from "no" to "safe yes" with operating conditions. And that is exactly what busy leaders need. One more practical layer: meeting design. If your governance desk meeting is too big, too long, or too abstract, people stop showing up. So design it for operators. Keep it at 25 minutes. Start on time, end on time. Use one page of prep, not 20 slides. In minute 1 through 5, intake and triage. In minute 6 through 12, risk translation. In minute 13 through 20, owner and due date decisions. In minute 21 through 25, operator communication draft. Done. If a topic needs deeper analysis, spin it out with one owner and one deadline. Do not hijack the cadence. And if someone asks, "Can we just skip this week?" The answer should almost always be no. A skipped week is usually the week when drift accumulates quietly. Let's talk about disfluency and communication style for a second, because this affects adoption more than people think. Operators trust clear, human communication. They do not trust policy theater. So speak like a person. Short lines, concrete examples, honest uncertainty when uncertainty exists. It is okay to say, "We don't know yet, so here is the temporary control." That sentence creates trust. What destroys trust is false certainty. If teams later discover your certain statement was actually a guess, they stop trusting updates. So practical communication principle. Certainty where you have evidence, conditional language where you do not. That is not weakness, that is operational integrity. Also, if you are using AI-generated or AI-assisted internal comms, do not publish raw output. Run a human clarity pass. Ask 3 quick questions. Is this precise enough to execute? Is this plain enough for a busy operator? Is this bounded enough to prevent misuse? If not, revise. This takes minutes and prevents hours of downstream confusion. Final point before action steps. A lot of organizations ask, what tool should we choose? That question is fine, but a better first question is, what operating behavior do we require regardless of tool? Because tools will change, models will change, pricing and packaging will change. Your governance behavior should be stable even when those things move. So define your non-negotiables. Human accountability for high-impact decisions. Documented data boundaries, traceable change decisions, operator-ready weekly communication, exception path with response SLA. If those 5 are stable, you can adapt vendors and models without chaos. If those 5 are missing, no tool choice will save you. Monday morning, if I were in your seat, I would do 6 things in this order. I would name one owner for the weekly governance desk. I would run a model change check on top workflows. I would require human approval for AI-assisted security patch merges. I would update procurement clauses for data handling and change notices. I would inventory agent-like actions and logging coverage. And I would publish one internal operator update this week. If you do just those 6, you are no longer talking about governance. You are running governance. And that is the difference that matters. So here's this week's question for you. What is one AI control your organization says it has, but cannot demonstrate on demand? Send that in. We may turn it into a future desk memo episode. And if your current answer is, we're still figuring out ownership, that is more common than people admit. Start there. I'm Michael Hannah Boutros Meyering, and this is AI Change Desk. AI news you can use, and change management you can execute. Quick postscript for operators, because this part is worth saying clearly. 2 current signals keep reinforcing the same governance pattern. 1. Enterprise release notes around chat-based coding workflows continue to push interactive code behavior and model transition timelines. Operationally, that shortens the distance between assistant output and production action. Shorter distance means better speed, but it also means tighter control requirements. So here's a concrete rule you can implement this week. No direct merge path from chat output to production repos without human review and evidence logging. 2. Updated model card detail and media generation capability releases continue across major labs. From a governance perspective, that means policy language has to track workflow type, not marketing category. So classify your controls by workflow: drafting, analysis, code assist, and media generation. Then assign approval thresholds and ownership by class. If you do that, your controls stay stable even when models and features change underneath you. And that is the whole operating goal here. Faster adoption, lower policy drift, and clearer accountability week to week. And one last implementation note. If you are launching this governance desk this week, publish the operating rules in one short internal message on the same day. What changed? What is allowed? What is not allowed? Who owns exceptions? If people can find those 5 lines quickly, they use the system correctly. If they cannot find them, they improvise. And in AI operations, improvisation is where drift starts. is AI Change Desk. See you next time!